Table or truth?
We've got some breadsticks today for the guests. I got these at the Bon Nan, which is a Mediterranean supermarket actually downtown in Pleasant Street. Good spot. Which, ironically, we have a lot of interesting news, I should say, to cover. Let me just set up here so we can. Okay. There's so much this week, these last literally 2 weeks to cover. I'm just, it's like within a week and a half since when we did a podcast last week where we started kind of touching up on the unfortunate. Yes, I am. Okay. The unfortunate reality of what's going on in the Middle East.
Trying to tempt me with the breadsticks?
Hey, man, it's all about self-control and controlling, the iliopsoas muscle, so one does not fall into temptation too hard. But they're really good. I might smoke one of those in a bit. I don't even know where to start. I actually had a couple of things that I really thought about, like almost convicted to really share with yourself and I suppose anybody listening today. Like, because I listen to the news all week, right? I don't know why. I just find world news fascinating. So hence we do this, But and there's so much like justifiable outrage as to what happened in Israel. The part that was pretty disturbing was the almost analogous existential problem that people had during World War II in terms of people that were denying like Holocaust atrocities being done, and those who maybe they didn't know any better and they were kind of supporting or trying to find ways to justify the attacks from Hamas to Israel. And I'm like, bro, did you watch the news? I mean, even the mainstream news, like just the footage, never mind the pundits, but just watch the actual video footage. The one that was the most disconcerting was obviously the one about the concert. There's just a lot to cover, but I mean, clearly in the world of war games, this is a foul play. Like no matter how you spin it, how at least this is my personal opinion, one wants to justify, injustice, however they perceive it. Going into another territory, invading it illegally, and massacring innocent civilians. Like, there's no other way to spin it. That is an atrocity. Like, how do you defend that? I'm curious to see how the hell anybody would like these Harvard students. You hear about that?
I saw that there was a Palestinian demonstration at Harvard.
Yeah, like as far as I can tell, the real thing that knocked everything off was, the initial letter that was sent that was pro-Palestinian, saying that the Jews were the ones that, I could be misquoted. I don't really want to misquote here. This is like serious stuff, but it's Israel's fault because of the systematic oppression, in Palestine and the colonization of their, I think the key word was colonization of their lands, which, it's funny because I feel like people are trying to use the Native American card here, and it just doesn't sit right. I'm like, no, this is this is not the same. Just because it sounds similar in terminology, no, I'm not buying it. Like, it's ironic that a lot of these students now are being doxxed that wrote the letters and stuff, because apparently, CEOs that run major companies who didn't take too well to the anti-Semitic sort of grievance that these students had from Harvard, just saying like, it's this, are now like, we're never going to hire these people now that we know who they are. So, but the irony is that cancel culture was kind of a trend that was brought on by similar said individuals like these students who were always trying to look at ways to cancel everybody for the littlest infraction. So like, it's almost like, it almost feels karma, which is, again, we go into a whole different episode on the metaphysics of whether like karma and spiritual mechanics are real, but that made me like a Black Mirror level, like, boy, that's a tough one. Too bad for you. And I wonder how many of these individuals were like screaming for canceling, people that, might have said some unfortunate shit, years ago. And I don't know, man. It just, all sorts of shit's going on, What's your thoughts on all this, first of all?
Well, I looked at that in 2005. Israel pulled all Israelis out of Gaza.
Yep.
In 2006, Palestinians had a free election
Right.
in order to govern Gaza. And
Good.
so basically, what you had was Hamas and the Palestinian authorities were vying for people's votes in order to run the Palestinian government in Gaza. So at the time, what we saw was a lot of Hamas members get elected. And so there was an uproar,
Mm-hmm.
uh, particularly on a lot of Israelis and others who said Hamas is a terrorist group. We can't let this happen.
Because of the Constitution in 1988 that was written out that seemed to almost be the equivalent of the Mein Kampf, where they wanted to genocide Jews. Did I hear that right, or was a pundit on Fox News completely out of the woodwork?
No, it was, well, again, 1988. I'm still at 2000.
All right, sorry to interrupt you, my bad.
No, that's okay. So at the time, what I thought personally was that hey, the Palestinians are running an election. This is what we want with democracy. If they elect Hamas members, this is what they've asked for.
Yeah.
Israel, you've pulled out. You want to let the Palestinians govern themselves. This is what we do. Now, many years later, I find out that it appears that some opposition members to Hamas ended up somehow falling off of buildings and dying. And so
Epstein-like.
Yes, there was some problems with the election. So, and then we look further down the road until October 7th, and what do we see? We see Hamas make a brutal attack against Israel. And so instead of sitting back, running your government, and there has been opportunities, I don't know exactly what those opportunities were, but there were opportunities for Palestine to have their own state. Now, whether it was going to be both the West Bank and Gaza, or it was going to be one or the other, there were some opportunities there that were balked at. So again, we look at this year, and instead of Hamas governing Gaza, they evidently have been preparing for war.
Wow. There was no intel on these the gearing for war that anybody had, whether it was the United States. Am I thinking the UN, the Israel, obviously? I mean, there must have been some.
Well,
I don't know enough about
Israeli and Mossad is supposedly have one of the top-notch intelligence organizations in the world.
Right.
And with Gaza being in Israel, one would think that if someone had intelligence on them, it would be Mossad. Now, the U.S., according to recent reports, did get some rumblings that something was going to happen. Nothing specific, but in the world of intelligence, you gather some things, and there's no doubt
word in the street.
Because we're allies, that little information as it is would have been passed on to Israel immediately. But there may have not been enough information. Unlike, and we will find that out months and months after a full investigation is done. But
the lacking of surveillance intelligence, that's something we'll get back to in a minute. Because in my head, how in the hell again were the Hamas allowed to cross that border protection barrier? We'll get to that in a minute. I think I wanted to touch on one thing here that makes you really think about just democracy Because I'm assuming, in theory, at least superficially, Palestine has a democracy, right? Because otherwise they wouldn't have been able to vote Hamas into office for good or bad. So there is a drawback to democracy if the citizens or the majority don't do their homework. Is that fair?
Yes, but again, calling it a democracy now, uh, it's not like since 2006 they've had another election.
Does Palestine have a constitution of their own, sort of like, or at least Gaza, where, if in the event of abuse of power, there's a checks and balances where the leaders can be voted out of office, like the U.S. has in theory?
No.
Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm sounding like a super patriot. Maybe the skeleton of the Constitution is something that other countries should consider to keep a checks and balance of their own election processes.
Yeah, but if that's the case, how do people in power stay in power?
Well, you influence the media. You keep trying to reelect, people that you find popular that can legally stay in power, right? You try to die down your opponents by censoring the media. Let me see. You try to rig the elections. I'm trying to think, like, what are the Dems doing here? Maybe I shouldn't bring that up, but
you're bringing up the Dems. I'm looking at autocrats and.
Well, you definitely censor free speech, and you try to get rid of the intellectuals, straight out of like the Nazi handbook.
We've seen that in Russia.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen that in Hungary. We've seen that in North Korea.
Yep.
We've seen that in China.
Mm-hmm.
Because look, when the British turned over Hong Kong, what happened? Immediately, the first thing they
came
did
in
was
and
they took out the media. That was the first thing they did.
The media and intellectuals. Gee, I wonder why Trudeau. I don't want to throw him. There's too much tangents to go into, but I was just seeing an article on how Canada is trying to censor YouTube content creators, where after a certain amount of subscribers that you have to register, I guess, your channel somehow, and it has to be approved by apparently the Trudeau government, which sounds very banana republicish, if I may pull a Joe Rogan. I don't see how that is. I don't see how the people in Canada can't see how that just seems to be a punch in the ass to their own well-being. But that's another story for another time. But yeah, like, okay, so assuming, Gaza, Palestine had not rigged. They had manipulated their governmental mechanisms to keep themselves in power one way or another.
Once Hamas was in power, they remained in power.
Now, this brings me to a set of points that I was actually thinking about. I put some thought in this, too. You have to excuse me here. I don't even know if we'll be able to cover all these in one shot, but I like to call this 8 or 9 questions you should be asking yourself on the Israeli-Palestinian war going on. I think it's 9 questions, actually.
Go for it.
All right. So number 1, who funds the hate crime-inducing Hamas organization? And the reason that I started thinking about this was because of the rumor and innuendo, being over dramatic here, or maybe just the fact, according to certain news sources, that $6 billion of U.S. taxpayer dollars were naively sent to Iran, hoping that that would help them, but it ended up funding Hamas behind the scenes. That's the claim.
Okay. Well, let me set the record straight.
Please.
The hostage negotiation with Iran included $6 billion, not of U.S. taxpayer dollars.
Okay, good.
These were dollars that were being held, I believe it was in South Korea, and was frozen due to illegal fuel funds, basically.
Right.
That were Iran was trying to do fuels, and then the UN and the United States had sanctions against them. So that was frozen. So as part of the deal, we released the $6 billion, right?
Not taxpayer money.
Not taxpayer money. This is Iranian money that was frozen. Now, what they did, they released it to Qatar.
Who's Qatar?
Qatar.
Oh, Qatar. Okay, sorry.
And so what they are responsible for is to hold that money and that money is still being held. Not 1 cent has gone to Iran.
Really?
They are holding that money for humanitarian and medical for the Iranian people. So contractors, when they do the supplies, then they go to Qatar, and then Qatar will reimburse them for their humanitarian
Provided it's
needs.
merited the right way.
Bingo. So
it's a Fox News bogey right there.
Not $1
Okay.
has been spent yet of that $6 billion.
All right on, man. Again, word on the street,
No
word
problem.
on the street, and I think Fox News. So
okay,
fair enough. Question number 2. Is it true that Hamas established a promise to themselves in 1988 in their quote-unquote constitution that suggested ethnic cleansing of the state of Israel?
I believe that is true.
All right. Anybody listening, feel free to research that one. According to, well, actually, I'll just throw it out there. And there, in an article titled "Israel Can't Tolerate This," Guy Benson, I should say, on Fox News posted this weekend, and a pundit made an interesting point. If I may quote indirectly, one of the pundits was saying, these leftist professor progressives teaching this colonization and Marxist rhetoric that's going on in schools like, I guess, Harvard and stuff, why don't they teach that when Hamas established this sort of so-called covenant in 1988, they had in their preamble to an emphasis to obliterate the state of Israel. So Fox News, apparently, if my sources, which was watching a clip of Fox News, I believe over the weekend, is accurate. So, I mean, that's on them. They mentioned that is actually in the preamble in the Palestinian Hamas constitution, however you want to phrase that. Now, I believe that this is a very good counterpoint as to why Hamas should not be taken as a legitimate government, because they sound more like a terrorist organization. Any government that's trying to ethnically cleanse somebody,
well,
I mean, not to sound like a surfer here, but thumbs down.
Well,
right?
Hamas has been declared by the U.S. and Western nations as a terrorist organization.
Right, fair enough. Okay, so this went. Then I did a little, reading on the internet from various individuals. If I may quote, oh God, the worst part is I can't actually. All right, the basic quotation is, one can understand the sympathy for innocent Palestinians going around that are not Hamas and caught in the crossfire, but how do the Palestinian people of Gaza make concessions for that in their constitution? In other words, if you and I lived in a country, like if the U.S. literally had declared, we are going to ethnically cleanse every Russian, right? And we didn't stand up and go, yo, what's up, right? I mean, we're not talking, it's one thing to try to replace Putin. It's another thing to literally any Russian you see, down with Russians in general. I could see, I don't know how, as a citizen of that said country, I couldn't, how can I be oblivious to the fact that that's not going to give good repute to the world stage? And maybe if I'm just too, oblivious to even care, just that simple metaphysical cause and effect of ethnic cleansing anybody usually is going to lead to an action-reaction force.
Well, you assume that the Palestinian citizens get free information.
No, but even intuitively, I would think that there's something in my... Yeah,
well, that's one. Number two is, of the citizens, the Palestinians, half of the population are children. So you don't have a lot of people. One. Two, they don't have power. Hamas is the power in Gaza, and so the people can't fight back. Otherwise, along with, if you threaten Hamas, guess what? You're not around long if you're in Gaza.
That's a very good point. So this would only reinforce that the Hamas government is not a good steward of their power and are solely responsible for the misery of the people. Don't blame Israel for this.
Correct.
Because in a very, like, if it was the other way around and Palestine was looking at, like, let's say Israel was a very incompetent state and really took advantage of their citizens. So everything's flipped around and inverted. I would agree with you. Like, that's if you really think about it rationally, even if you are a kid or even a teenager and you're trying to get into government or in power or whatever, you'd have to make concessions for that in your mind. And if you can't do that, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, that's pretty fair, right? All right. I mean, no, legit. Like, this was interesting, by the way. I found out that there was an article in Sky News Australia. If anybody wants to look this one up, it was titled "Disgusting Reporting Scrutinized Following Hamas Attack on Israel." According to, there was, okay, that was the name of the title. Sorry. According to the actual article, there was a gentleman who had, and I quote, dropped truth bombs at the UN in 2017, who was an ex-member of Hamas. And he's from Gaza, and he's addressing the UN General Assembly, in particular the Palestinian delegates there, and he was telling them to their face, what you're doing as leaders in Gaza is a total violation for the human rights of our people there. You kidnap Palestinian students and torture them in your jails, and you torture political rivals. The suffering of the Palestinian people, he says, is the outcome of your selfish political interests. You are the greatest enemy of the Palestinian people. If Israel did not exist, you would have no one to blame. I thought that was legit. So, again, do your research, but that was pretty interesting.
No, that is interesting, and I believe, well, it sounds like he's not just saying Hamas, but also the Palestinian Authority has let their people down.
Now, we bring up a very good philosophical tangent that I'd like to get into eventually if we have time. Okay, so those are two questions to be asking yourselves if you're listening to this and you're actually trying to make sense of the world right now in the Middle East. All right, so once again, the first one was, who funds the hate crime-inducing Hamas regime? And the second question was, is it true that Hamas established a promise to themselves in 1988 that suggested ethnic cleansing of the state of Israel in their so-called constitution, or whatever you want to call it?
Okay, well, the first one is Iran. Iran funds Hamas.
Okay. The third question is, or the third thing to ponder is the socio-economic inequality between Israel and Palestine and Gaza is claimed due to a system that was designated to keep the Palestinians in poverty in the Gaza Strip, heavily influenced by the Israeli neighbors. And this question is, according to what extreme, if I may use quotation marks, leftist socialist popular opinion seems to be pushing, and some mainstream media, not all mainstream media, but some of it. In other words, a lot of them out there, of course, not Fox News. But obviously there's some other ones. I don't want to misquote the actual newspapers. I could find that information out if anybody wants to, leave a comment or something. We'll take a look. But okay, so what the hell was the point of this? Yeah, okay, is this social economic inequality a big variable as to why the situation is what it is right now in Palestine? I personally don't think so. Just for the record, I think that there's self-responsibility on the side of Palestine to basically bring their own society, culture up to par and not necessarily blame the prosperity of their neighbors in Israel. But that's just me.
Yeah, but again,
but this is what I think the Harvard students were trying to claim.
Well, what do they have in Gaza? They're surrounded by Israel in the south. You have Egypt, and then you have the ocean there. So what kind of resources do they have? They have to depend on others, and along with,
well, if you're next to the sea,
supplies,
don't you have the Mediterranean Sea?
Yeah.
Well, that's a very good start for getting.
Well, the other thing could be if things are run properly there. Again, like you said, they do have the Mediterranean Sea there. Again, you could build up tourism, hotels, the whole nine yards, a vacation place in the desert.
Yeah, that's the intuitive thought I was thinking. I'm not an expert in Middle East, any like just geography or geopolitics here, but I can't necessarily say that. Yeah, just because Israel is doing very well for themselves, that they're the sole reason why they're oppressed. And I don't know why, but then I'm tying this in with what I'm guessing is the one of the claims of the Harvard students that had written up that, whatever you want to call it, manifesto / letter. I don't even know who the hell it was addressed to, but now I would think that if you're in Harvard, you want to do a little research and cite your works because you're in fucking college and you're in fucking Harvard. But like, apparently nobody did any research. I don't know how that works, but I'm waiting to hear the counterpoints on that. But it seems like they kind of went in over their heads. And that doesn't make the professors, I suppose, on international relations ever affiliated with this, if there's any at all, look good either. And it's Harvard. I can't stress it enough.
Well, that's if those students did take a course on.
I don't get it, man. I mean, it's not looking good for Harvard. But okay, so I think we all agree that that's no excuse for the rampage that the Palestinian Hamas insurgents, or whatever you want to call them, did that day, like a week and a half ago.
Correct.
Or a week ago, or whatever. That's okay. People are welcome to put their opinions, but remember, like, this is a very sensitive issue. So if you're going to go pro-Palestinian in the comment section, I don't see anybody doing that.
No, but
by all means, but please explain, like, in a rational way, how somebody would come to that conclusion. I'm missing something here because I don't see how that's an excuse in any way to justify this shit. But that's me, and I'm working on not getting too vernacular.
No, be vernacular. Be you.
Be you. All right. Do you want to throw in anything? Because I've got a few more.
No, I'm waiting for the next one.
Okay, the next point to ponder, this would be point consideration number 4, is also a big root of Gaza / the Palestinians' existential problems due to the age-old issue of when governments in charge want to keep a people weak and dependent on government. A government that will push heavily a propaganda campaign of trying to reduce the population's self-awareness of their human potentiality. By doing that, the said government will be able to influence the public consciousness to be more dependent on the people in charge, which in this case would be Hamas. And the government will promote then a campaign of the people of pushing perhaps victimization, idleness, and dependency on the system they've created. I'm curious I think we already covered this though. Like, it sounds like that's what Hamas did. I don't know if they did it deliberately just to keep power, or they're really that hapless as a government where they didn't even know how to create structure, But I suppose, do you have anything to add to that? It's not really even a question. It's more of an observation, I guess. But
no, I don't know how Hamas governed Gaza, but it wasn't pretty in Gaza.
Yeah, I mean, it just sounds like if it wasn't a banana republic, it was some sort of a regime, though, that seem to obviously exploit their people. I mean, the fact that they're being used as human shields, it seems, they can't escape Gaza, just says it all. But okay.
Well, the other thing is what you had, and I don't have my numbers, so forgive me. 20 to 30,000 Palestinians were able to, through the checkpoints, go into Israel for work and then bring that money back into Gaza in order to help the economy.
I kind of wrote this in my notes here. If I may just, I guess, read my notes. If I was a Gaza Palestinian living in Palestine for the last, let's say, 50 years, I would have been questioning how the hell is it that we're not being given the same opportunities to really develop our economy in way of living like maybe our Israeli neighbors. I would think that would have crossed my mind. I'm not trying to downplay.
And who would you question that to?
My neighbors in Gaza, Palestine, the people at the shop.
Right.
I don't know.
So, and then there are spies everywhere, and Hamas finds
even
out
spies. I don't know,
that you are bad mouthing the government.
But if you really
are you going to be around long?
Well, it goes back to the collective consciousness of just questioning reality. Maybe I'm asking too much here, but if enough people do it, including the spies, and you're like, hey, wait a minute, dumbass, like. The regime you're serving, even though you're making probably more coin right now, if you really sit and think about it, we could live way more abundantly than we're living now if we kind of switched our mindset on how to boost our economy rather than just this weird banana republic we've set up. I don't know. I mean, I get that there's a lot of oppression and inability for people to just stand on a soapbox in the middle of a square or whatever, but even like underground having conversations in basements and stuff and being like, hey, like, yo, this is bullshit, right? like something's not sitting right. Do you ever get that feeling that like we could be living way better? How did the Israelis get so prosperous? And we kind of do a little research. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. I would think that even intuitively and collectively, individuals would kind of at least have that sort of reckoning. Maybe not everybody has enough to like change the entire system for themselves, but there'd be enough people that would support that, and then slowly maybe start to influence even like the henchmen of the Hamas government. I'm just saying. I don't think that's too much of a stretch, but maybe it's just me. I know there are questions like, how's our education system? Is Hamas feeding us enough encouragement to be, to see ourselves as capable citizens that can create a system for ourselves that can rival our Israeli neighbors? I mean, these are thoughts that just cross my mind. I know this isn't the Claude show here, but like at the same time, I'm a human. Other people have given a mind to reason and stuff. I don't think that that's trying to sound condescending to people in Palestine and in Gaza so much as I realize it's harder to get your voice out there. But I think even amongst each other culturally, I mean, look at all the underground like movements around here that happen. They may not all be illegal, but there's definitely underground movements, underground trends, underground cultures. You'd think there'd be something like as a rebel underground culture there.
It's ironic that you use the term underground because that's where Hamas is.
Well, there is a lot of black mirror kind of like ironic, bittersweet, karmic shit going on. Yeah. The some things that I've heard. I won't mention anybody I know, but the idea of gentrification or perhaps socioeconomic equality brought by Israel is a big reason why there's the Palestinians there are repressed. But it seems like the cultural mores of in their Israel side of the territory, they've done pretty well for themselves. So why not just simply copy the model plan that they have rather than just be bitter about it? I don't know. I'm just throwing out some logic there, but they must be doing something right. So what can we do to change our reality? It's an honest question. I think that's just something that anybody who's going pro-Palestinian should really just sit back and have that intellectual thought in their mind and just go, let's just think like adults here. No matter where you are on the planet, what are the best and most efficient ways that we can create a system where we can live abundantly, regardless of our Israeli neighbors, whoever our neighbors are, where maybe we don't have to feel like we're oppressed compared to like the prosperity of some other area.
Well, don't you think that October 7th have changed everything? And so those questions, which are great questions to ask, should have been considered before October 7th happened. Because now Gaza is never going to be the same.
No. Well, that brings me to another point, actually. Let me see if I can find this one. I don't want to skip too far ahead, but it's reputable image. How does Israel as they pretty much steamroll across Gaza and try to like take out all Hamas? And one thing, word on the street that got back to me today, again, talking to some of the members at the old shop, was as long as Israel does their due diligence and they gave fair warning to everybody in Gaza to get the hell out of there, unless of course you happen to be an insurgent, terrorist, whatever. But for the regular citizens, we don't want to kill you, unless I'm reading this wrong. And hypothetically, you will be able to come back to Gaza and reclaim your property once we really like check this place. Now, I noticed there's a chuckling here. But...
All right, so here it is.
Okay, yeah, please.
Israel gave 1 million people, Palestinians, 24 hours to get out of the north and go to the south.
It's like the book of Exodus to the -1.
24 hours to hit the trail, and it's not like you don't have 1 million people in the south doing their thing, that you're going to have another million people going down there. And we've heard
that's
the
like
story.
Biden's border crisis happening all in the same day.
How do you always bring, what are you, Fox News? Always bring the border in somewhere and then blame.
I apologize. That was a cheap pun. I'm sorry. My bad. My bad. All right. Going back to the seriousness
let's talk
of
about
the
the borders are.
No. Let's not talk. We'll go over that in another episode. My bad. The reverse exodus. There, 1 million people displaced down south. I don't know. Like is there like an exit strategy, if you will, on what happens once they get there? And
When you say, oh, you're talking about the Palestinians who all left
to
their
be
homes
fair,
in the
yeah, they
north
can just
in order to get
yeah,
out?
like are they able to come back once the whole area is cleaned out? I haven't heard anything about that. I'm just curious.
Well,
I'm assuming that is the case.
if there's anything left. We've
Well,
already seen the pictures of over 500
I mean, it can't be
sorties and
easy.
bombs
Yeah,
being dropped in northern
it's
Gaza.
still technically their
And
right to come back, I guess.
oh yeah, but again, what is it you're going to have when you get back?
Your land? I mean, what are the people in Maui going to have when they get back to their
I
land?
knew you were going to bring up Maui.
Why
So
wouldn't
you
it?
want to go?
I'm just saying it's a human condition to go back to your land, whether it got fucked over or not. And in this case, rightfully so, because like the government of Hamas brought it upon themselves. But you know,
Okay, but all right. So you go back to your land because again, this is a city area. You've seen it. You've seen the pictures that
yeah,
it's
well, now
already
you're
been
gonna have to,
devastated.
yeah, you're gonna have to get out of the rubble. I get it, but I mean, it's still like in theory. I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something here.
Or you've gone too far down the road. I think for the timing because
If you
Israel has not gone into Gaza yet. They're building up the troops,
no,
similar
but I
to
would.
Russia around the Ukrainian border.
What was the biggest boneheaded blunder that amongst that George W. Bush had when he invaded Iraq? No exit strategy, right? He finally goes in there, steamrolls through the country.
No, it was
Well,
a
okay,
blunder
now
before
what?
then.
Well, there was a few, but
No,
that was a big one.
No, the major one was going in there in the first place.
Yes, and then the WMDs that didn't exist and everything
Right.
else, and then but amongst the blunders, the boners, if you will, that happened during the Iraq War, right? One of the big ones was, what the hell do you do now that you've displaced the entire region, with the U.S. presence? What the fuck? Like, how are you going to fix that? That's a fair point. Like, going into a country and, obviously doing your thing. Now, this is different than the Iraq War, so I'm not going to compare it exactly. It's because this is literally just vengeance and bringing balance, and not only that, but making sure that the people in the Middle East realize that like Israel's not to be trifled with. But all I'm saying is
Well,
that
I think
for every Palestinian who goes, the only reason I'm bringing this up, by the way, it's not because I actually I'm trying to start shit here. It's more if I'm thinking as someone in the Middle East who feels like I would say incorrectly violated towards the whole thing because my brethren Palestinians were kicked off their land. In terms of a PR, what would be the most practical way to kind of restore some balance in the Middle East? I'm just saying, like, one thing that came to mind, and this is why I brought this up, is giving the displaced Palestinians in Gaza back their land, provided they go through a quick denazification, if you will, to make sure that
which land are we talking about?
Gaza. Again, if you're
again in 2005, the Israelis pulled out of Gaza.
yeah, so they'll pull out again, most likely.
Oh, you mean when? I'm not sure because they can't have Hamas or any terrorist group in Gaza ever again.
That's fair. That makes perfect sense. But the issue is, how is this going to appear on the world stage in like 2 months?
I don't think Israel cares.
You don't
How's it
think
going to
so?
look on the world stage in 2 months? As long as the United States is backing them.
But they're surrounded by potential enemies that their enemies may see this as an excuse to just take advantage and take the land and just keep it. Whereas the other option would be to give back that land to the people that were voluntarily and willing to cooperate and go back to the land. I don't know. This is not an easy one. I'm just saying for geopolitical relations, what would be the wisest course of action? That's probably the best way to phrase this.
Well, I look at that, number one, the current mission is Hamas has to be destroyed.
Yeah, they most likely will be destroyed.
To Bibi. So that's what the current goal is. So going in, you've already advised the civilian population along with leaflets that you drop. And then you also have consideration, which I haven't heard a lot of, particularly from, I guess BB is the prime minister. He's not the president. So is he prime minister?
Of Israel?
Yeah.
Benjamin Netanyahu.
Netanyahu.
Yeah.
Does it say what his title is?
Prime Minister is Israel.
Oh, well, got it right. All right. So the prime minister, who in his speeches, particularly the last one that I heard, it was only 3 minutes long,
Yep.
and there was no mention of the hostages. So what came out tonight was Hamas sent out a report that they are ready to release all the foreign non-Israels unconditionally. But but it has not been settled as to exactly when that's going to happen. So
now they're doing that because they don't want to get completely decimated. Is that it?
Well, if you hurt American citizens, Americans are going to be upset.
Right, they'll get special forces to help out.
Right. If you hurt French citizens, Italian citizens, whatever,
right,
those countries are going to be upset. So,
I know a lot of Israelis have dual citizenship with the United States.
There are, I believe, actually, I think there were. Well, I'm thinking of Palestinians. I think there was 400 or 500 Americans in Gaza who are all surrounding the Egyptian border trying to get out. And so there has been a deal with Egypt in order to get American citizens out. And there's also humanitarian aid sitting in Egypt waiting to get in to help the Palestinian people.
Okay, so it's clear that the world stage doesn't want complete annihilation of the Palestinian people that are innocent, I might add, in the Gaza section. I mean, that seems like, yeah, right. So what I had mentioned, I could be wrong, seems like the most reasonable solution to try to show a token of good faith to bring balance back to even if, yeah, because it is what it is, but the Israelites didn't go there to necessarily take over the territory, I guess is a fair way to put it.
No, they're going into Gaza to take out Hamas.
Right. So that's why I brought up the whole thing about, what's the most reasonable way to display that they're not taking the territory. I guess the people from Gaza that got displaced get the first picks, right? I mean, what else is there? Unless I'm missing something here.
No, when you look at the aftermath, I just see a whole lot of rubble. Who's going to rebuild Gaza? Whole 9 yards.
You should have thought. And not to sound callous, but
they
should have thought of that. Like some of those individuals.
They did. There's no doubt that Hamas knew what was going to happen once they went into Israel.
Right. So
and the again with the brutality, children's being decapitated and other atrocities. What I didn't realize until, we heard what happened were people had safe rooms. And so...
You mean in Israel?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Those on the border town.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they'd go in their safe rooms. As a matter of fact, their children would sleep in the safe rooms and, the parents would be in the other room. And if there was whether it was a rocket attack or, what happened here, some type of invasion, they would roll in the safe room, surrounded by, how much concrete and whatnot. But what happened was when Hamas could not get to the people, they burnt the house.
But in theory, the safe room fireproof and oxygen?
No. And so there's a number, and I don't have the numbers of Israelis who either got burnt up or because the smoke had to come out and were either killed or...
Who designed those safe rooms? You'd think they'd have like some sort of event system that somehow was more inconspicuous, that you wouldn't just like clog up and
Well, you're thinking these people are billionaires and could have,
Well,
you know,
I know it's
if
not
you're
like
going to do a
Cloverfield
safe room,
Lane.
then hell, you might as well have an elevator that goes, 5
Lex
floors
Luthor style.
underneath,
Okay,
and you
fine,
have your.
fine. All right, I guess.
It's just a safe room. No one pictured this kind of thing happen. You just want to survive and
Right,
and be
tornado
safe.
attack, that kind of
And
thing.
yeah, and
All
so you're thinking more of rockets coming out of Gaza, and you're safe there. Not that they're going to burn down the entire house.
Good God, man.
To get to
All the more. Okay, so you're going to throw a little. What would be the word? Postulate to this fourth point here. In 2.5 months, 3 months, what the hell do you think? As of October 15th, 2023, on the date of this publication, would happen? What would that area of the world look like? Israel-Palestine, assuming that Israel successfully finishes their campaign, which I'm pretty sure they will.
Well, they'll have an occupying force in there for some time.
Yep.
Or for some time.
Yeah, which is totally reasonable.
Right.
I think that's very reasonable,
But
and I think the Middle East should probably be aware that they do the same thing.
Building back up. Is Israel expected to pay for the rebuilding of Gaza?
No.
And then the other question is, and actually some of the questions have been asked, when you hear about the Palestinians, you also hear about the other countries who are sympathetic in the Middle East, but yet won't take Palestinians.
I thought about that. That's a very interesting point. Yeah, it's like they're their own paisanos, if you will. And what's up with that? Like, you'd think you'd...
Because as you're aware, Egypt immediately closed the border. Yeah. They're not letting refugees out of Gaza.
Is it because they're afraid that Hamas terrorists might go in there and cause trouble in their own country?
Well, that's one point. Or actually, again, you got...
So then why unify with terrorists? Or if all countries have that kind of...
No, but if we're just talking about, terrorists is one thing, but we're talking about the Palestinian people.
Mouse to feed.
Why? Right, bingo. Once you get them, you may have to keep them. In Saudi Arabia, Qatar. As a matter of fact, there are Hamas leadership believed to be sitting back comfortably in Qatar. And other Middle East things, because when you hear about Israel and they talk about Palestinians, they said they're not being treated right. But when it comes to taking them, it's a whole different story.
First Eric Adams and now this. That's crazy, man.
Hi folks, hit a like and don't forget to subscribe, and share the episodes if you like them.